Hello, vinyl community. Hey, how you doing? And great to see each and every one of you today. And welcome to Beatle Brad's channel. Today is going to be kind of a fun and a different episode, as you probably saw down in my picture and everything. It's about the Beatles and their cars. We all know the Beatles song "Drive My Car" that the Beatles did, but the Beatles themselves started actually purchasing and buying a lot of cars. So as money came into the fortune of the Beatles themselves, they started buying their own cars. So this is kind of a video. I don't know if anybody has done a video like this or not, but this video will kind of show a lot of different cars that the Beatles owned. And these are just the cars that they owned. So I'm not getting into cars that they rode in to do different things, or the prop that they used for Yellow Submarine or anything like that. So, you know, don't type and say, oh, you forgot the Beatles' Yellow Submarine. None of them ever owned it. Okay? So these are actual cars that the Beatles owned. So what do you say we get started? And let's see. The Beatles, when they first kind of got together, when they first started getting famous, I'm just going to show all kinds of different cars. So kind of stay with me on this. The Beatles owned many kinds of cars like this. This is a Mini Cooper. Not striped and all that kind of stuff. This is a Corgi. But just to kind of give you an idea of what kind of a car. They basically, a lot of them had Mini Coopers. And throughout their Beatles years and all, they kept their Mini Coopers. There's a postcard of them with the Mini Cooper, which is a great one to have. George Harrison, you know, people talk about George being the kind of the car person in the Beatles. Ringo and John, they were huge car people, and Paul, they really, all of them were. George did a lot more with his career as in cars later on, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. This was a Rolls Royce. I should have brought a picture of it. I've got one, tons of them. But this is a Phantom 5, and this is what they drove when they went to go see the Queen of England when they got knighted. This was John's Phantom 5 that he owned, which he had for many, many years. John had a very nice Phantom 5. That's a long wheelbase. For those of you that are my car people, that's a long wheelbase Limousine Phantom 5, 1965. That's the thing about, I can talk about Beatles and I can talk about cars. So those are the two topics that I really enjoy and that I really know about. So it's kind of fun. And I'm not showing you every car they ever owned, but I'm going to give you a pretty good run and illustration. This is a postcard. This is a car that Paul McCartney owned. And they rode in this in the premiere of Yellow Submarine. And this is a Hispano Suiza, which is a French car, very, very luxurious, probably more luxurious and more expensive than a Rolls Royce at that time, this Hispano. And Paul had it all decked out and changed inside and all that. He owned that for many years. And it was in the Royal Museum, not Royal Museum, it was in the Museum of Lord Montagu. And I went to go see that car just last year, and it's gone. So a private collector has purchased that car. So don't know as of now where it is, but John really enjoyed his Rolls Royces. All four of them loved Rolls Royces. They had them. This was John's roller, as he called it. And you see this in the video, A Ballad of John and Yoko, and you also see it during the filming and movie of Let It Be. They took a lot of pictures of this car with them being in that Rolls Royce. The Beatles really liked this. John had this furnished with a TV inside of it, and also they all had record players. And John even had a reel-to-reel player put into this. I mean, you know, talk about ancient. That's reel-to-reel, pretty crazy. And during the Beatle days, John had a very nice Bentley out of this magazine, which they all had Bentleys as well. Uh, where to start? Where to start? Since we're kind of talking about John, let's carry on with John solo wise. This was a Ferrari that John Lennon purchased, and this is, they did make a diecast of this, but this is well over $500 for the diecast. But that is John Lennon's Ferrari. I've seen many pictures of this car, and that's really, really neat to see that. Excellent car. Next, I'll show you John Lennon. This was all four of them, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, all loved having Mercedes. And this is John Lennon's Mercedes Limousine. And you see this in a lot of videos of Imagine, which has just recently come out. And this is, like I said, John Lennon's. It even says John Lennon on there. And this was the 600 series Mercedes Limousine. And this was like top of the line. These were really incredibly well-built cars. They had in the back here in the back wheels, they had hydraulics. So when the car had luggage in the back here, it leveled itself off electronically with the hydraulics to bring up the back or lower the back suspension on the wheels, so it would level it off in the road. And these were hydraulically lifted. Mercedes made the 600 series, which is the Limousine series. These cars, in the driver's compartment up front here, they had a button that you pressed, and it electronically opened the boot, or trunk as we call it in America, and it electronically closed it. So it would electronically go up and down by pressing that button to open that up. They discontinued making that because every time they go over railroad tracks or hit a bump, lots of times the thing would pop open and luggage would fly all over everywhere. So yes, that's why they kind of discontinued that. But anyway, there's John Lennon's Limousine. This is a very, very rare and expensive diecast. Very nice one to have. Thrilled to get that. That's a nice piece. And I think even if you're not a Beatles person, or much knowing about the Beatles, you do know about this, and this is John Lennon's Rolls Royce. This is a 1/43 diecast. This is a special made one that they made a couple years ago. Just a magnificent, this is hand painted Rolls Royce. Just absolutely a magnificent. I'm trying to go fairly fast, so try to keep up with me because I'm going to go quickly through a lot of this because I've got so much to cover and so much to talk about. So this is very rare, very, very expensive, and that's on a 1/43 scale, which is kind of a little bit smaller. And then if you start to talk about collectibles, this is the much larger scale Rolls Royce of John Lennon's. And this too is hand painted. It's very heavy. This is the 1/18 scale. And everything opens on this. These are all limited edition. Like I said, the doors open on this. I don't know how much of this I'll open because it's very fragile. And these are made out of metal. So is that other one. But yeah, see, there's the doors. I've got lots of videos of John Lennon showing this car. I've even got some home movies of John during Imagine. And he's got this car in the trunk. Or in the trunk. I showed you the trunk. Yeah, John Lennon in the garage. He's got this Rolls Royce. But very nice. Like I said, very heavy. That's a beautiful piece. I don't think anybody has ever shown that on the VC. But John really loved that Rolls Royce. And last I heard, that was in Canada, that car ended up in a museum. And I don't know if it's still there or not, because I went to go look for it in Canada, and it was in a museum that was much, much further up than I wanted to go to. But then out of this magazine, here's an whole article about that John Lennon's Mercedes that I showed you. Whole article about that car being sold. And I've got a whole video of the auction taking place. I've got a video of that car being sold, so it's kind of neat to have the actual video. But not only did John Lennon have a psychedelic Rolls Royce, but he also had a psychedelic Bentley as well. This is a Mark VI, 53 or 54, I'm not totally positive, Mercedes. And he had that painted a lot like the Bentley. And they've never made a diecast of this. I really have been searching for years hoping that they would. But I went to a car museum in Indiana and I did take pictures of this car. So I do have pictures of the Bentley itself. There it is there. Hanging in there with me. Like I said, I got a lot to show. The Beatles really had a lot of fantastic cars. They really collected them and really enjoyed them. Back to John Lennon's Rolls Royce. There's a photograph out front. And during the filming of Magical Mystery Tour, you see a lot of clips of John Lennon with his Rolls Royce in the background. And also in the race, when they're racing around the track, you know. The Rolls is in there as well. John had a chauffeur-driven Mini Cooper that he had. He had all the black glass during Sgt. Pepper period. He had a Mini Cooper, and all the glass was black, tinted out, and all that kind of stuff. And he had a chauffeur, which was pretty funny. The chauffeur had the John had the front seat taken out so the chauffeur could sit in the back seat and drive because the chauffeur was over 6 foot. And John just thought that was hilarious to be tooling around in a Mini Cooper and people not really recognizing who it was. And then this magazine, the whole entire magazine is all about John Lennon's Rolls and being painted and all that kind of stuff. This is the publication Beatleology, which was a fantastic publication magazine. It's no longer being made, but it's just great. But anyway, I'll show you another picture here. But yeah, so that's Beatleology magazine. Kind of hope you enjoyed that. Then this is a big, if I don't drop everything else in the process, out of this big Sgt. Pepper. Here is in John Lennon's garage. That is John and Julian, and John standing in front of the psychedelic Rolls Royce. Very cool, very cool. Okay, onward to Ringo Starr. Like I said, Ringo had a lot of cars. Ringo was a big car person as well. Kind of jump around a little bit with Ringo, but this is one of the cars that Ringo had, this Mercedes. Ringo wrecked this Mercedes. I've got pictures of it somewhere, but I'm not totally sure where they were, so I couldn't find them in time to do this video. And then this is another picture. Whoops. Got that. This is another picture of Ringo, one of Ringo's cars, which is really kind of neat. Oh, you know, I completely forgot all about this. At the very beginning, I wanted to tell you a trivia question, so I wanted you to think about this. This is my trivia question. I still didn't get it in. What was John Lennon's last car before he died? So I'll let you think about that while I'm doing my video. So think about the process of the thoughts there, and I'll continue on. So what was John Lennon's last car that he purchased? And then this is Ringo Starr with his car that he had, and this is a very expensive car. Anybody would know what this is? Nope. This is, yep. This is a French car. Yeah, you guessed it. A French car. This is called a Vassal Vega. And I've seen several of these at car shows. They are very expensive. I've got a video of Ringo, person who bought Ringo's car of this Vassal Vega. Excuse me. Princess Margaret owned a Vassal Vega. Frank Sinatra owned a Vassal Vega, and they were extremely expensive French cars. So the Beatles bought very expensive and very elaborate cars. And here is a die cast of Ringo Starr's Bossa Vega. That's a hard die cast to get. Very, very hard to get. Like I said, being a car person, I've really enjoyed collecting die cast. That's for sure. And then back to Ringo, still going on, talking about Ringo. Ringo did a song called In My Car. So yeah, the Beatles even solo-wise did songs about cars, and this is In My Car by Ringo. Very cool. Let's see, where we go next? Let's go to Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney, yes, Paul had a very nice, like I said, they all had Rolls Royces, so I could show you. You know, they had Silver Shadows, and this is a Corniche convertible Rolls Royce. But one of Paul's earliest cars that he purchased was this one, which is a, let me hold it better, which is a Mini Cooper. And this is an actual die cast for Paul McCartney. This is a little hard to get. And there's the information all about Paul McCartney and the car if you want to pause that and read it on your own. That's really cool. And here is the actual die cast of Paul McCartney's Mini Cooper that he owned. Excellent, excellent die cast. I really think that's just so cool. Really nice. And as I was saying, Paul McCartney did some songs. Here's Helen Wheels. Paul McCartney talking about Helen Wheels, good song. Backseat of My Car. Paul McCartney also did Driving Rain, which was a song and a title of an album. But one of Paul's ultimate favorite cars was an Aston Martin. And that's a DB5, kind of like the James Bond 1965 DB5 Aston Martin. That's a fantastic looking car. And this is a magazine, not the whole thing, but it just has a picture of Paul McCartney and his Aston Martin on the front. It's a green car. He's owned several different kinds of Aston Martins. He's had silver ones like I just showed you, and he's had blue ones, and he's had green ones. But this is the whole article about Paul McCartney owning this green Aston Martin. Paul was with this Aston Martin for years. He owned this, drove this. He and Linda, they courted lots of times when they were dating with this Aston Martin. Kind of like the Mini Cooper. I forgot to tell you, the Mini Cooper, just a little trivia side note for you. Paul McCartney was riding in that car when he was inspired and was in the hillsides of the country in England when he wrote Fool on the Hill, which was really cool, really neat. And this is a very nice Franklin Mint die cast of an Aston Martin. This isn't the exact same car as Paul's, and it's not the James Bond one, but it's just a nice replica one of Paul's. It's the exact same year, but only just a different color. Like I said, the door's open. So that is Paul McCartney's Aston Martin. And Paul has got several other cars now. He really likes his Lexus, and he really likes his Corvettes. So, you know, I could have shown those, but that's just too many more cars. Now we'll move on to George Harrison. And this is kind of a fun and rare collectible. This is George Harrison's Mini Cooper that he drove during the filming of Magical Mystery Tour. Like I was talking about John Lennon's Phantom 5 that I showed you. Well, this is George Harrison's Mini Cooper that he raced around. And he kept this for several years, and he drove this a lot. There's pictures of him in front of the house with that Mini Cooper. I forgot to show this. This was actually one of the limousines like George Harrison owned. Well, I've shown it now. George Harrison's limousine that he owned during the many solo years. And this is just like the die cast like John Lennon's. And like I said, this opens up as well with the hydraulics. And the doors all open on this one. This is a Corgi as well. Corgi and Dinky made some fantastic die-cast. And just to show you, off this album, there is the blue, it's in black and white, but I promise you it's blue. There's the George Harrison Limousine Mercedes. Hang in there with me, I'm almost done. I know this is a long video. There is the record itself, and there you see that it is a blue limousine. Alrighty, George Harrison. Like I said, George Harrison loved his Jaguars. There's another that's an E-type Jaguar. That's like a 67 Jaguar. Nice, beautiful car. And I collect a bunch of these. I got stacks of these Beatle monthlies. And here's a picture of George sitting in the back of the Jaguar. The back opens up, and then there's kind of the trunk area. For those of you that are not my car people, but that's kind of the boot or the trunk. And it would look like this Jag. It's not the same color. George didn't have a yellow one. But this opens up like this. This is just kind of an illustration to give you an idea. But that's where George was sitting in the car, was in the back of there. And here's another photo of George sitting in front of the car. Another Beatle magazine. Sitting in the front. Like I said, George Harrison loved his Jaguars. And he had this Jaguar equipped with a 45 record player, which is just awesomely cool. I love it. Not only love the Jag, but I love what George did with it. And then George had a lot of Mercedes. He really enjoyed his Mercedes just as much, like I was showing you about in that magazine, or the magazine, the book. Now I'm really getting off. The record. There's another Mercedes limousine like George had as well, and Ringo and John. The album cover, like I showed you. And then out of one of my Beatle books, here's a picture of George Harrison during the Magical Mystery Tour time, and you can see George with a white Jaguar XKE, and that is a 1966. So I'd like to get a white one die-cast, which would be really great to have. That would be nice to have. I don't have the 45, which actually came as a picture disc of George Harrison Faster. So I don't have that. So George Harrison did a song called Faster. He also had, where did it go? What'd you do with it? George Harrison was very much involved in racing. And there's George Harrison whispering and talking, or probably yelling, being at the race, in Jackie Stewart's ear. And then there's a McLaren F1 that George Harrison owned, which you can see in the video of when the Beatles, Real Love, couldn't think of it. George at the racetrack. But like I was saying, back to the video, George Harrison did a video called Faster. And Jackie Stewart's also in that video as well. So that's kind of a great video to look for. Paul McCartney, like I said, Driving Rain. I think there's a video for that one. Not for Ringo, In My Car. And John Lennon did Watching the Wheels, which there was not a video for that either. So I hope you guys have been thinking. Do you have any idea of what John Lennon's last car was? So, hope you didn't Google it or do something like that. I hope you thought on your own. But this is a 1978 diesel Mercedes station wagon. But John Lennon bought his in 1979. So this is the only representation I've got is a 78 station wagon. But he had a 1979 diesel Mercedes station wagon. So that is John Lennon's very last car, was a station wagon. So how about that? Isn't that crazy to know that John had a station wagon? Did you ever realize that or ever know that? Kind of fun stuff. I hope this wasn't too fast for you. It's probably a lot to process. I tried to make this as quick as I could so the video wouldn't go on for an hour. But I do thank you for watching. I do thank you for being a part of my channel. Comment down below. Let me know about some of the cars that you know about that the Beatles have had. George Harrison's had Porsches and Jags and Mercedes, just like Ringo. He's driving Mercedes, and it's just great fun. But this is just a few things that I could show you to kind of broaden your Beatle mind of not only just albums, but what cars they drove. So thank you very much for watching, and as I say on my channel, I'm out of here. Take care, everybody. See ya.